It's been a great year for the Tesla share price. It's gone from, if we went back to the beginning of May in 2020, around $140 a share, traded up near $900 in January of this year. But since then, the share price has slid quite heavily. So what do the next few weeks and months hold for Tesla? Are we going to see it bounce back to these all-time highs? Or actually, are we going to see further selling and further pressure on the stock price? Tesla's always an interesting one to look at. Of course, such a high-profile company led by Elon Musk. It's not had the best of times in the last few months. We can see after a stellar performance over the last 12 months or so, and even more, of course. If we look at the highs hit in January of this year, traded up almost to $900 a share, sold off really heavily into March. We had something of a bounce. But it's turned lower again, and just at the time of recording, the day before, almost back to those March lows. So I thought, well, let's take a look at it in a bit more detail, take a look at some of the recent fundamentals, some of the recent news, and then come back onto this and take a look at the chart in a bit more detail. Because I think from a technical point of view, it's really interesting where it is now. So let me talk a bit more about what's been going on with Tesla, then we'll have a look at the chart analysis side of things. Hello, I'm David Jones from Capital.com, and I thought in the latest video on our stocks channel, let's take a look at Tesla. Clearly, probably the most high-profile tech stock, if we label it that, out there. Always one, I think, that divides opinion when it comes to investing. Is it overvalued? Is it undervalued? Is it going to the moon? Is it all just a bubble? We'll deal with all of this in this video. So as usual, I'll talk a bit about some of the recent news about Tesla, then we'll jump back onto the platform, look at things in more detail. I think it's really interesting from a technical point of view at the moment where it is in that trend. So we'll take a look at that in a bit more detail. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, does help support the channel and means we can continue to push out lots of different content during the week. Right, let's get into things and catch up with what's been going on with Tesla. So just in case you weren't aware of what Tesla is, they are an electric vehicle and clean energy company, of course, fronted by Elon Musk, incredibly colourful CEO, has opinions on lots of things, has been having something of an influence on the cryptocurrency market in recent weeks and months. But back to Tesla. In 2020, the company sold almost 500,000 electric cars. The Tesla Model 3, the more, should we say, affordable version, although electric cars are never cheap, has become the best-selling plug-in electric vehicle worldwide. Let's talk about their earnings, latest earnings that came out. First quarter earnings came out in April, so just over a month ago, or last month we saw Tesla earnings. The market was expecting earnings per share of 79 cents. They beat these quite comfortably. Tesla, the earnings came in at 93 cents a share on revenue of just over $10 billion. So on the face of it, a good result in the first quarter from Tesla. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, Elon Musk is a fairly high-profile CEO of Tesla. And earlier this week, he did tweet saying that Tesla would no longer accept Bitcoin as payment, rowing back on a decision that was made not so long ago. And he's saying the company won't take Bitcoin as payment because of climate change concerns coming from mining Bitcoin. This did have, I think, a negative impact on the Bitcoin price, and perhaps also shaved a little bit off the Tesla price too. Of course, famously this year, the company bought $1.5 billion of Bitcoin. It stated that in its filings. I think it sold some, but it still has a core position that it views as diversifying its financial risk. But the share price has been under pressure, and more of that in a second. In April, it sold 26,000 electric vehicles in China. This compares to 35,000 that it sold in March. So there is a concern as to is it starting to falter in that market? Clearly an important market for any car manufacturer. If we look at the share price, all-time highs in January of this year, but it's been a different story since then. At the time of recording, the share price is down by about 36% from those all-time highs. So the shares have slid by more than a third, but if we wind the clock back and look over the last 12 months, that share price is still up 250% where it was this time in May of 2020. Still a fantastic performance But what does it mean? If we have a look at the trends in a minute, is there more weakness to come? Is this slide a buying opportunity? Let's talk about the big levels to watch, then we'll jump back onto the platform. So because the volatility has been quite big, the levels to watch are quite a way away. We've got, first of all, $685 from earlier in May. After that, the April high could be a hurdle if we see a stronger recovery up at $780. But on the downside is where it perhaps gets a bit more interesting, I think, for Tesla. We saw the share price trade down to $539 a share in March and bounce back. We're not a million miles away from that now, so I think that's a really interesting level to watch. Plus, we have below that $500 a share, something of a psychological level, perhaps. But as usual, let's put some color on these numbers. Let's take a look at the Tesla stock chart in a bit more detail. Of course, I picked up on the trend over the last 12 months, but if we go back even further, of course, Tesla shares had been trending higher, somewhat dwarfed by the move we've seen since the lows last year. But let's take a look at that in a bit more detail, because I think that's what's relevant at the moment and why it is so interesting down here. So I've drawn a trend line on the Tesla chart. We'll come back to that in a second, but let's take a look at a couple of technical indicators first. Let's kick things off with a 50-day moving average. I think always a popular moving average when it comes to stock prices. And we can see through most of the rise up, moving averages give buy signals when the price moves above the moving average, like it did here in April 2020. And we get sell signals when price moves below the moving average. So we had a little bit of choppiness in the autumn of 2020. And then, of course, we had the rise that started. The price, middle of November, moves above the moving average, and off we go, and fell back below it in Feb of this year as the price moved through 760. A little bit choppy again since then, but the latest signal we had from that moving average came for me beginning in May as the price fell through 680. At the moment, that moving average is sitting just below $680. For the share price. We'd need a rally through there for the moving average to signal things are positive again. But let's take a look at another indicator, the RSI, to get a feeling for overbought, oversold when it comes to Tesla. I think it's interesting where we are now on the RSI. You can see that during May, over the last week or so, we've seen that RSI move into oversold. So traditionally, this would suggest that perhaps the price has gone far enough to the downside, and some chartists would view this as time for a bounce. If we go back through some of the more recent signals, we had very briefly an overbought signal in mid-April that did end up marking an important short-term top for Tesla ahead of $800 a share. And then the previous buy signal, or the oversold signal, it got a bit messy late February and into sort of the second week of March. This is the problem with RSIs in strong trending markets. They can give us an extreme reading far too quickly. But I think it is interesting down here. Tesla, if we go back and look at the last 12, 15 months or so, it doesn't go oversold that often on this 10-day RSI. So I think it is something worthy of attention. For me, what's more worthy of attention is the trend. Big fan of following trends. And if we look at the trend in Tesla, this trend line's done a really good job on the way up. Plenty of touches on the way up. Traditionally, we need 3 touches to confirm a trend line. And I think we've got that. Whenever we saw the price sell off near the trend line, the latest was in March of this year, we saw the buyers come back in, which is why it's interesting, I think, for technical analysts, where it is now. Just in the last 24 hours, we've seen that trend line tested again. So that trend line's coming in pretty much bang on the lows from yesterday. So about 560 a share is where the trend line is. So I think it does make Tesla really interesting at these levels. We've got the old lows from March. They're in at 539 a share. So again, some people would see that as an important reference point and think, well, actually, if Tesla's going to bounce from anywhere from a charting point of view and continue this trend, we're down here. I mentioned that $500 could be an important level. So I do think this whole band, if we pick up on these highs from September, the price back then punched to $538 a share. So I think where we are now from 500 to 560 could well end up being important support from Tesla. So looking at support, resistance and trend, I think many chartists would take the view it's a really important area, and perhaps we'll see a bounce. If we were to see a bounce from here, first logical target would be for a run back up to those mid-April highs, up around 782, that sort of area for the share price. Let's look at the other argument. What if it carries on pushing lower? I think if we break below that trend line, 560, we break below the March lows at 539, clearly the correction, if we want to call it that, from the highs is still in place, and we could see further pressure for Tesla back to 500, a break below 500. I think we'd start targeting the lows from mid-November around $400 a share. So really interesting to watch down at these levels. Are we going to see this, 14-month trend for Tesla resume? Is this sell-off from 900 just a correction? I think we should well have our answers in the next few weeks or so. So well worth keeping an eye on Tesla down at these levels. That's it for the update on Tesla. We'll come back to it and see how things fare. Does this trend resume, or do we see further weakness? But for now, we'll leave things there. So from me, David Jones, and Capital.com, good luck with your trading and investing. For more trading videos just like this, please subscribe to our channel.